2029 capabilities, but it sounds like from those of you that talked to me last week that hers was easier to access than this one anyway, so. Thank you.
Oh gosh, Aaron is not here. Yesterday, even when I was trying to keep up with some of the things on Dropbox that you were telling us to go to, and I know that she had emailed me, and I don't know if it was the one that she has emailed me that I saved because she taught me how to do all that, or if it's something that you sent that I saved in there. So we was going to delete everything. But anyhow, I tried to go back in Dropbox yesterday as you were talking and click on some of the things. It would say nothing found, or and those kind of words, and I was unable to open it. And I had 3 different saves on there, and with summer, and none of them would open up. And I didn't have that trouble the first day of class, and so
Okay,
I don't know what's going on with mine.
I did not, between being tired last night
Yeah.
and getting one set, I only got one set graded, but I did get one set graded, so. So when Aaron, I assume Aaron will be here later.
Yeah, because
So-
what we said today was that I was going to just delete everything and then just try to redo it again.
Okay, well, let's wait until she's here before we
Okay.
do all that. Because I didn't, and then I'll do that test message in one of the breaks too.
Oh, so you didn't send it?
No, I didn't.
Okay,
I didn't
good,
send
that's
it.
what I was worried about, okay.
So that'll be a test. Okay, there are a few, well, there's Branch. So, good morning. Oh, that's,
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
Sarah's not here yet either.
She's not gonna be here today.
Oh, she isn't.
She's the one that wasn't gonna be here today.
Okay, so we're recording for her. Okay, no wonder. Brent. All right, a few ask in class issues. A lot of times when I grade papers, if it is something that I want to share with everybody, it's not something that you did wrong any more than anybody else. It might be the first person who I grade that paper, and then somebody else may have the same comment, and I didn't put ask in class because I remember I just circled it. So it's basically something I want to share. Those could be either substantive and or APA related and or editing, writing related. So anyway, on putting the the APA citation at the bottom of the page, some of you struggle with APA and some of you didn't get that right. The easy thing to do on that one at least, copy paste from the syllabus. So anyway. So if you have an ask in class circle on your paper, let me have that and we'll, yeah. You have one? Here, I'll just do that. Oh, a simple rule, but one that you don't run across very often in terms of APA. The piece that I did is Miller with Jack. Commonly, articles are Miller and, or Jones and. The with suggests that the second person was involved, but less so. And so a Miller with, Jack gets less credit than a Miller and, or Jack and Miller, or Jack with Miller. The second author does not get as much credit for a with as with an and. Okay, and suggests a comma, a more co-equalness. Although the first author usually gets a little bit more credit than the second author. But if you're doing a series of works with a second author, what you typically do, Jones and Smith, and then Smith and Jones, you just kind of alternate because of the first author credit. Once in a while, you'll see that somebody actually puts a footnote, these people are equally credited. But despite you putting that there, the person listed first still gets more credit. So that's the reason authors working together typically will rotate who gets first authorship. So anyway, when you cite in the text, if it's a with, it's just Miller 2007.
Oh.
And then in the references, it's Miller with Jack. So when you don't run into that very often, but when you do not put the with in the text. It's just the first author. Or it might be, you might have a situation where you have Miller, Smith, and Jones with Abel. Then it would be Miller, Smith, and Jones in the text. The with would show up in the reference, but not in the text. And we've got a situation like that on some of the stuff we've done with this new standards indicator school improvement stuff that we've been doing, because we had a research assistant, and sometimes it's and sometimes he's with. So that would be an example where you have three authors listed. If he's a with, his name would be in the back, but it would not be in the text. Okay, it's a rule you don't run a. The other simple rule here, and this is by convention. By convention, you typically put the comma or the period inside the quotes. You see this a lot, and this probably seems more logical, but by convention in typing, that goes on the inside, not the outside. Now, if it's a question mark, then you have to think about the meaning of the sentence. Semicolon probably is going to be outside.
Asking
Did you have some?
the snail trail is the fingerprint world. I said that.
Oh, yeah. When you were talking about the paragraph on Michel de Montaigne's snail track, most of you talked about how the personal story could be a representation of that. What a lot of you didn't get there was the fact that some stories are more representative of the sweep of time than others. And so then that becomes a question is it the storyteller's skill in picking a particular aspect of a snail track's experience and say that any given individual, there might be some aspects of that individual's life that are more story-worthy than others because they are more representative of the sweep of. Or it may simply be that some individuals' lives, in general, are more representative of the sweep of time than others. For example, Forrest Gump. Does that make sense? But most of you got that, but a lot of you didn't talk about the fact that some stories or some parts of snail tracks are more sweep of time representative than others. Others. Despite the amount of time I spent on the specifying the two bads, the bias versus reification, most of you struggled, can I see yours too? Most of you struggled to write that paragraph. So I'm going to read you a couple of examples of paragraphs. The two bads associated with storytelling are bias and subterfuge. Bias prevents unintentional prejudice when telling stories or disclosing ideas. Narrative provides a more personalized take on a story, but also allows for such bias, exaggeration, and inconsistencies over time. Subterfuge evades the truth and attempts to make conclusions more objective. The writer will make events come to life and bring about meaning and plot through personal bias and subterfuge. The historical events themselves do not speak, but rather give way to the view of those who tell the stories or write about them. So the use of the term subterfuge, which is what reification is, trying to make it appear more objective than it really is versus bias. The way that Sarah wrote that, if I can find the paragraph on that. Using narrativity as a vehicle leaves the storyteller facing a dilemma of two bads that need to be balanced. One of the bads is bias. The events pertaining to the story do not have the ability to tell themselves. They do not have a voice. People must tell the events, but when a person relates a tale, he or she will explain it based on his or her interpretation of the details and facts, which leads to bias. The second bad is lying. I like subterfuge better.
I'm simple.
Because I don't know that people necessarily lie on purpose. I think the subterfuge is probably a better word. But researchers can easily fall into the trap of using the data or records as the voice of their reports through making the research seem more objective than what it is. That's what they're really doing. And I don't know that some people are doing that because they're lying. There may be some who are, but more often it is lack of awareness. They've seen data emerges or the historical record lives. They've seen those kind of language so often that they do this without awareness. Now, there may be some that are lying. You know, they know what they're doing and they're still trying to make it seem. But I think subterfuge probably is a more general term. But, you know, it's difficult sometimes to get inside the mind of the person who did that, so you really don't know whether they're doing it on purpose or out of lack of awareness. Anyway, theories and patterns do not emerge, and data does not say. Both emerge and say are in quotes. The emergence comes from the mind of the researcher, not from the record. And that last sentence is right on. So if a lot of you struggled with that particular paragraph, a couple takes on that. Were there others in yours? Or was that the only one? So, did you have others? Anybody else have ask in class?
Yes, nation.
Oh, yes. Some of you struggled. You got this. A couple of you forgot to put the page numbers in, but some of you struggled on getting the page number at the bottom to be halfway in between the bottom line and the bottom of the paper. And remember on your footer, when you do that, if you click the default on that, when you go into that is 0.5. But if you click on that and you watch it go from, if you click from 0.5 to 0.4 to 0.3, you'll see that number go up and down. So, and if you get it down to about 0.2, you'll see that move, and at a 0.2, it should be about halfway between the bottom line and the bottom of the paper. So next time you do that, just click on that and watch it go up and down, and then find the one on your computer. If it's Word, it'll probably be 0.2. If it's a Mac, it might be something else, but that, you can see that go up and down. Okay. Yes?
Yeah, I had an asking.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes, egregious. Does everybody know what egregious is? Now she's really worried. She did the faux pas of writing in gender-biased language. And what is so she said the author, which is fine, and then she said he. Well, I look around this class and I see more she's than he's. And that language is pretty much went out from the 60s and the 70s on. So we need to be aware of using non-gender biased language. Now, APA gives a suggestion on how to avoid that. Do you know what that is? I'm not just picking on her. I want to talk about this because a lot of people have not read the APA manual thoroughly enough to know what the suggestion is.
Use plurals.
Huh?
Use plurals.
Use the third person plural to the extent possible. So then you talk about they, you're okay, instead of he or she. Now, some people will say at the beginning of a book, chapter 1 is going to be he, chapter 2 is going to be she, alternate the terms, or they'll use she, s/he, but that's cumbersome, or they'll use him/her, that's cumbersome. So to get around those kinds of things, we have inherited language from a patriarchal society. And so the plural is probably the way that is easiest to get around that. But you need to be aware of that in this day and age. In the 60s and 70s, that was still kind of, people weren't aware, but you should be at this point. So I just didn't want to, I'm sorry if I used the word egregious to embarrass you. I did want to talk about that because a lot of people are not aware of how important that is. Okay, any others?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that. I know that's what the APA says, but I'm trying to make sense of it. Substituting he, singular, with a plural word.
Well, then you gotta be careful that you don't get subject-verb agreement out of order too. So you have to make sure that you use language in a sentence. You don't wanna use they and then use a singular verb. You don't wanna say they says, you'd say they say. So you gotta be careful, but when you're doing that, the use of the plural usually helps you get away from either the he or the she, but you have to be careful that sometimes you just fix that here. There may be other places in the paragraph that you didn't fix, and so sometimes you have to read the entire paragraph to make sure that you fixed it throughout. So that's a good point.
And I think I read somewhere that one is no longer acceptable either, right?
One's pretty formal. A lot of times that's more formalistic to do that, and some places don't like you to be that formalistic, so. But so you may have read, I don't know that anybody has said that you can't, but I know that some people would say that one says this, that's a much more formalistic form of writing, and it's sometimes so awkward that some people don't like you to do that. I would guess that that was directions on a particular thing rather than a blanket prohibition on that. I don't know that, but that would be my guess. Okay. Ready for your attendance quiz for the day?
He's not even having fun.
Oh. Just gave you that and want that one. I didn't even think, I wondered why that was in my mind. It was because it was on the quiz and I didn't. So anyway, if you get that one right, now you know the answer. That's number one on the quiz. Which one of those is correct? That was an easy one, wasn't it? All right, number two. Which of those is correct for ellipses? This is number one. This is number two. That one, that one, that one, or that one. Which of those is correct? Number three. What is the split infinitive? Number four. Am I going too fast?
Yeah.
You're an English major. You should have that done already.
Did you want us to give an example? I'm
No,
writing
no,
the
no,
definition.
no, just what is it?
I don't want to do that.
Number three, I'm sorry, just three, what is it? Candy, surely you're not gonna miss that one.
I probably am gonna miss that one. I teach 7th grade English, so, and my kids have such a broken education that I've had to go back to nouns and verbs, so.
Number four, what is the most infamous example of a split infinitive? It goes back to a TV show. The most infamous split infinitive.
Tell us what the TV show.
Well, that would be telling you the answer.
Not necessarily.
That was just a hint.
I don't know that one.
Number five. Which of these is correct? Number six. Oh, this is an easy one too. Can you see that?
It's kind of hard, but
All right, let me read. Because it's 22, by the way, I can't write italics, so when I underline, I'm signifying that that's italics. So you got an italics 22, in parentheses 1, not italics, comma, 15 to 27, oops, period. And this one is 76 italics, in parentheses 4, not italics, 485 to 501. And one of those is correct, and one is not. These are common APA errors, by the way. That's what this little quiz is
What's
about.
the,
What's the,
This is
thing?
verses.
oh, versus, okay, that's what I was looking, I was like,
Oh.
what's the 15?
Oh.
No, that's verses.
So 22
So it's this
italics,
one versus that one.
Got it, okay.
Sorry.
22 italics, 1.
and both the, both the 22 and the 76 are in italics?
Yes, they're both italics.
And
And
then,
I will tell you, if you're looking for what's wrong, that's not. Both are italics and both should be italics.
Yeah.
yeah,
So that's not,
fine.
that is not what is wrong.
15 to 27.
Something
period.
is wrong in one of those two.
Is that 15 to
This, by the
27?
way, is probably
So 15
the
to
most
27.
common of all APA reference errors in terms of doing the reference list. This particular mistake right here is probably the most commonly missed out of everything that is done. That is, I don't know that it is done the most often, but if you would go through a list of references from different authors, this is, the people who know what they're doing will still miss this probably more than anybody else. More than anything else.
They look the same to me.
They're not the same though, even though they look the same. Well, if
There
you
are
don't,
spaces
if you,
between
if
them.
you don't know yet, we're going on because you don't, at this point you won't
You
know.
asked
that.
which one was right, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
so. Remember, these are not scored, these are explanatory, so after, you'll soon know the answer even though you don't know now. Number 6. Oh, another easy one. If you have Jenkins with Wilson, how do you cite that in the text? And that's an easy one because I just told you that, so.
What are the names again?
Jenkins with Wilson. How would you cite that in the text? Oh, I'm sorry, Jenkins with Wilson, 2009. How would you cite that in the text? All right. I want you to do just write just the name. Assume that you're doing a citation in your references in the back of the text, so this is not in the text, but this is in your reference list. All right, and I want you to do this part. So set this up. Jones, Russell S., and Smith, Brian B., 2009. So just print just that part, how you would do that.
Jones,
So
Russell.
it was Jones, Russell, did I say B?
S.
Russell S. And Smith, what was the name I just?
Brian.
Brian B. Short memory. 2000, what year did I give?
Okay.
2009.
So that hit, the name is
I'm
actually,
sorry,
these are,
when you get old, your short-term memory goes.
I'm sorry.
I can remember things that I read at Michigan State back in 1976 better than I can remember something that I just,
Ignore me. My brother is keeping my daughters and can't find the house key. I'm
Okay.
so sorry.
okay.
I've been trying to say it's here and I can't do it, so.
And the question is how to write it in the,
And how would you set that up? I just print that as if you were typing it.
oh, okay,
and you said 2009?
the reference, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
then there'll be a title after that and all that, but I'm just concerned about how you do the authors.
I can't drop. There we go.
Okay, last one. In text, you've got Jones and Wilson, 2009. I actually remember it this time. And you have just done a direct quote that comes from page 209. So show me, this is the direct quote. And you're gonna tack on at the end, Jones and Wilson, 2009, from page 209. So show me how you would set that up. So you've got the quote, something on the town by Jones and Wilson, 2009, page 209. So show me how you would do that.
Page 209.
Yeah, page 209. And again, these last couple are about spacing, but they're common errors with spacing. All right, are we ready? All right, number one, you obviously got that right because the period goes on the inside, not the outside. I've just covered that. So that.
Yeah.
Number two, which of the ellipses is correct?
3.
The 3. This is correct. Sometimes one of those other 3 is correct. Which would that be?
4.
What is the difference?
If it's the end of a sentence.
It's if the what you left out is at the end of the sentence, that one is the period. Very good, Zambo. A lot of people miss that. And a lot of people know that ellipses means left out information, but I see 2, 3, 4, 5 more. I see everything. This and this if it's at the end of the sentence. You left something out, period. Split infinitive.
To put a word
adverb.
between, the word to and the verb, usually it's
Yes,
an
an
adverb.
infinitive is to plus a verb, to go. A split infinitive would be, you would say to go quickly would be correct, but some people would say to quickly go, and then you have stuck an adverb in between the to plus the verb, and that's a split infinitive. Technically, that is incorrect. However, it is misused so much that more and more people are accepting split infinitives as okay. I, however, am not one of those because I'm old. So I don't like split infinitives. Do you teach split infinitives?
I teach infinitives.
So do you try to avoid them, or if they, at that point, there are worse things that you're worried more about?
Yes,
Yes.
they can write a sentence.
That's where I'm at.
All right, and the most infamous.
Adults.
To boldly go.
There you go.
Yes.
Did you see? Hold your hand up to so.
To boldly go where no man has ever. I am a Trekkie, so I knew that one.
To boldly
Yeah.
go. Star Trek. How many of you remember that?
I
I
still
just
watch
never
it.
watched it.
You never had you, but you
But
had
I
heard
knew
that.
she says that, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I looked it up too, but I didn't give myself credit because I looked it up after the question.
Oh no. I was dealing with my brother, and it hit whenever it,
Oh.
it hit me when he said it right there.
All right, which of these is correct?
The first one,
Very good. And the answer, then why?
because it's, the second one's a continuation of a journal. So the page numbers are continuing and the first one, isn't. It's either,
It's issue.
Starts over.
All right, this is called continuous pagination, where the volume is paginated from page 1 to page 1000, page 600, and so you may have 4 issues. So first issue may go from 1 to 150. Issue number 2 continues from 151 on to 300. It does not start over numbering at page 1. This is issue paginated. So it goes from 1 to 100. Issue 2 would go from 1 to 98. Issue 3 would go from 1 to 115. Each issue starts over. And one of the underlying principles in APA, which they don't tell you, you have to infer this, is that the APA system abhors redundancy. That's redundant information. You do not need that to find this if we can count. Because where does this come? After page 484. So you don't need to have that to know that this comes after page 484. You can look it up without that. So that's redundant information. Here, this is not redundant at all. Because if there are 4 issues, there's going to be 4 sets of pages 15 to 27. Michelle, you're looking at me with puzzled face. Are you, is that because you're
am.
tired or is this not making sense?
No, I got lost.
Okay.
So 22 with the 1. So what if it was 22 and then 2?
That would also be correct. Although it probably wouldn't be the exact same because this journal, volume 22, has the first issue goes from pages 1, say up to 100. Issue 2 goes from pages 1 up to 98. Issue 3 would go from page 1 to 115. Every issue in issue pagination starts on page 1.
Okay.
Many journals are what are called volume, consecutive pagination. So that volume goes from page 1 to 1,000 or 1 to 600. And so the second issue, instead of starting over on page 1, continues at page 151. The last page of issue 1 was page 150. The first page of issue 2 is 151. That's consecutive pagination. So we don't need that information to find this. Here, you wouldn't know which issue that's in without that because there's more than one set of those numbers.
Okay.
So you get it now?
Yeah. What red flag was the large number 400, page 400? That
Yes,
didn't all be in
and-
one journal.
Now, tricky. Now what do? Now you have to know the journal. Harvard Educational Review. I know that journal is consecutively paginated. So because I know it's consecutively paginated, I know that's redundant information. But if I didn't know, and so you'd have to look at what this journal is. If you don't know whether that's consecutively paginated, you can't tell from that. You can tell here because this is a large number. You wouldn't have a journal that would have an issue of 485 pages. That's right on the border. Because some issues and some journals might stop at 100, 115. Some might go to 150. So again, unless you know the journal, you're not going to know by that whether that's consecutively paginated or not. So if you do not know, here's a couple of rules of thumb. Most of the newer electronic journals are not consecutively paginated. And some of them will have 15 or 20 issues. And each article is a separate issue. So instead of having, some of the electronic journals will have volume 18, and they might have 25 issues. So it'd be volume 25, issue 1, volume 25 all the way up, or volume 15 all the way up to 25. And they have set it up so that they do, because it's easy to do, instead of an issue with 5 or 6 articles in it, that issue is just that article. And then the next article is issue number 2. Or they could do it traditionally, that pages 1 to 100 are issue number 1, and then issue number 2 starts over pages 1 to 115. Again, you don't, but the more recent electronic journals are not as likely to be consecutively paginated. Old line, more prestigious journals are more likely to be consecutively paginated. Older journals that are not as prestigious are more likely to be issue paginated. Journals that are more focused on explanations of research and they're more focused toward practitioners rather than researchers are more likely to be issue paginated. But those are all rules of thumb. And so unless you know the journal, you're going to have to do some research. All right, so here's the research. Easiest thing to do if you're not sure is to Google the name of the journal. And almost all journals have a website. And usually on that website there will be examples or recent tables of contents. And so if they do, you can go to those table of contents and you can quickly figure out whether issue number 1 has 5 different articles in it, and then issue number 2 has 6 articles in it, and what is the page number on the first article in issue number 2? Since they will have examples of that there on their website. So you can figure it out pretty quickly, usually. And for those in which you can't find it, call a friend. Email or call your handy reference librarian, because what you have trouble figuring out, they will be able to figure out in about 35 seconds. I'm telling you folks, don't underestimate how much more reference librarians know about how to find this stuff than you. They do that for a living, and they are good at it. Yes, Roxanne is good, but it's not just Roxanne. I mean, she's good, but other people who are librarians, I've never talked to a reference librarian that I wasn't impressed by. When I was at U of L, there was an African-American reference librarian, which is kind of unusual because you don't see as many African-Americans in that field. And she started making presentations when I was teaching the general intro to research class, and so I got to know her over time. She was superb. She helped me all the time. She not only did those presentations for my intro classes, but she helped doctoral students. And in fact, I got to know her well enough, I even wrote a letter of recommendation when she went up for tenure. But, you know, it doesn't make any difference where you see a reference librarian. They know that that's what they do for a living. I may be biased because my mother was a librarian. Oh well. Remember, part of storytelling is bias, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, do we have anything else? Oh, the rules for text. We already talked about that, the width. In the text, it would not be cited. You would just do Miller, who was Jenkins without it. So it would just be Jenkins 2009. And then in the citations, you'd put the width in. All right, spacing on the initials. The key here is, who was the person I gave you?
Jones, Russell, S. Jones.
Russell B.
S.
S.
Russell
RS.
S.
Yes.
Notice that there is a space there. And a lot of people will do it this way. That's incorrect. APA with APA, it is R period space, S period, comma, and always an ampersand before the second or third author. So however many authors there are, when you get to the last author, there's always an ampersand there. Does everybody know the term ampersand?
Mm-hmm. There is a comma before that. I missed the comma before.
Yes, and there is a comma before. And so the ampersand doesn't come if there are 5 authors, the ampersand comes after the 4th. If there are 2 authors, the ampersand comes before the second author. But there's always an ampersand before the last author, and there's always a comma right before that. And then who was the other person?
Brian B. Smith. B. Smith.
Space. And then the date. By the way, date goes in parentheses, and there's a space after the there's a period after that parentheses too. So this and this are commonly missed. Oh, and this, actually there's three things. There's one, there's two, and there's three. Those three things are commonly missed in those common errors in APA.
How do you spell ampersand?
AMPERSAND. It's above the 7, I think, on your computer,
Right.
on your keyboard. Isn't it, above the 7?
Mhm.
On your numbers.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
All right, anything else about APA?
You had one more question.
Yeah, you had the on the
We're doing it?
town,
Yeah,
What was the last one?
Jones
Jones
and
and
Wilson.
Wilson with the page number.
Oh, yes,
Jones and
okay.
Wilson, 2009, page 200.
There, it would be and what was the year?
2009,
2009.
page 209.
And it is an ampersand rather than an and. Why?
And is using MLA.
Well, but this is APA.
I know, I was just saying
Yeah.
that's one difference. I teach MLA.
More than 2 people.
Because that's how
You're
it's.
inside the
That's what the
parentheses.
APA
Because
says.
that's,
If you're
Yes, that's
inside
what you said.
parentheses, it's an ampersand. If
okay.
it's this way,
In the sentence.
Jones and Wilson went to town, then it's part of the sentence, so it's an and. There you have a compound subject.
I'm really glad you said that.
So it's a part of the sentence. But if it's inside the parentheses, it's parenthetical to the sentence, it's the ampersand. Okay? And, comma, P, not PG, P period, and then there is a space there. A lot of people will do it this way, with no space. That's just legibility. Same rule applies when you're doing equations. Why did I underline that T?
Italic.
Because it's italicized. How do you know what stat symbols to italicize and which ones not to? APA has a table. It's a handy, and that's one that you should visit. I don't remember what page it is. Somebody look that up if you have it with you. There is a table that shows common stat symbols and which ones get italicized and which ones don't. It's also handy because it actually gives you the name of what those various tests are.
Oh, that's what I need.
It's really a handy table. You should be aware of that.
Page 119.
Page 119,
Yes.
and it's about 2 or 3 pages long, I think, isn't it?
119 to 4 pages long.
Yeah.
5 pages long.
By the way, Greek letters are not italicized. So if you got chi-square, which is the Greek letter X, It will not be italicized. P is italicized for the same reason. Remember, my underlined your italics. Because both the T and the P are italics. Notice, space before and after equal. Space before, space before and after less than or greater than signs. Why? Because it's hard to read if you don't put those in there. So, space before and after equal, space before and after less than or greater than. What else did we?
If you were to do, let's say you're citing and it went over to page 210 too, 209 and 210, it would be PP, right?
Yes, then, it is PP, 209 to 210. Yes, very good. PP is for plural. By the way, a lot of those rules are in one of your APA readings, the Miller 2 bundle. The APA Quick Guidelines from Miller. Now, caveat. I did that when it was APA 5, and I have never gotten around to, and since I'm retiring, probably will not, update that to APA 6. But most of the things that are in that carried over. Those things did not change in APA 6. So that's a good quick guideline, and it specifically tells you these kinds of usage things. So that's, and it's only 4 pages long, so that's one that is worth looking at. All right, anything else? I think those are all common APA errors. This particular attendance quiz was about common APA writing errors. Oh, and one that I didn't put on here, but that is a common misusage and is one of my all-time great pet peeves, would be the sentence, data is going to make me crazy.
You told us this last
Data.
time,
Plural.
and I underlined it.
It really bugs me when people say data is. Should be datum is, or data are. Okay. All right, why don't we take our first break, and then we will, who's first?
Does it matter? Because I wouldn't mind going first.
Well, let me look at my list.
You don't have an order.
Well, probably I do. Denzin, that's Aaron. Aaron's not here. Well, I guess Aaron won't be first then. Sarah Jacobs, correlation, is that you? Okay, so I guess, so if you want to set up during break.
I need to run to my car real quick too.
I should have worn my Star
I was
Trek
gonna
shirt today.
bring my phone in and now
I
I'm
should
going
have.
now.
If I had known, I'd worn my Star Trek shirt.
Do you have a Star Trek shirt?
Yes, I have one that's got Spock on it. It says "Check yourself" or "Trek yourself before you wreck yourself." I wear it to school all the time.
I brought my hoodie in.
You have a Star Trek hoodie? So I assume you got that one right as well.
Yes, I got it right the first time. My presentation, I don't know.
And I do-
From last time, it's all Star Trek.
Oh, that's, okay, I do remember.
Yeah, that was.
And I do teach infinitives. I'm just sleepy.
She presented it, but I put in pictures.
But my kids, I really go back to the
Oh,
basics.
my wife teaches middle school language arts, creative reading, and she spends a lot of time on that kind of stuff.
Well, I even use Grammar Rock, like you know the old.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
I still use that.
really,
I
because
use
it's in music and it helps them.
And I think, well, I remember it from a kid. So there, you know, as a child, I remember
How
that.
many kids remember how to spell encyclopedia from Mickey Mouse? Well, if you're old. Get the encyclopedia, E-N-C-Y-C. You know,
See,
and-
I've
see
never
that,
seen that.
but see, that's because Mickey Mouse Club was on in the late 50s and early 60s. When I was young enough, that was on in the 50s. And that Funicello, you remember, you know,
Yes.
it had MS later? She was one of the original Mouseketeers.
That's cool. And then
And
I
so,
need to look that up.
that the spelling get the encyclopedia, you know, that goes back to, that was, you know, a big, I mean, it was a big word, but, you know, they had it to, so kids could spell it. Kids, they couldn't spell anything else, but they could spell that because they knew that song.
Well, I use and the kids will even say, "Oh, I'm singing lolly lolly lolly. Get your adverbs here." I'm like, "Good, that's what I want," you know. But just the basic parts of speech. But I do get infinitive is about as complex as
I was
I
gonna
get.
say, that's
about as complex as I get.
you've got
with them.
other fish to fry at that level.
I do, and
You know,
but we
just-
do towards the very end of the year. I do expose them to some of the stuff that they're going to get in 8th grade. Of course, she says I have to start back at the beginning too.
Well, one of the things, a lot of the school districts are going to year-round education,
Mm-hmm.
which helps at-risk kids much more than it does.
Yes.
Well, my kids struggle so much because their education is broken. There is
See,
no
and-
other way to put
And
it.
so then if they are off during the summer, you have the
Yes.
summer forgetting phenomena, which doesn't occur for upper middle class kids.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're going to the library, they're hearing language used, you know, so they have an intuitive sense of language that at-risk kids don't have.
And I'm one of the few educators right now that you'll probably hear that's actually for Common Core. I'm for it, and I'm
Well,
aware.
no, I think most
Well, I mean-
educators are for it, most policymakers, I mean, don't.
But well, I'm saying a lot of my friends that teach in other states and things,
Really?
they're so against it. And I've told
Well,
them, I was
why?
like, that's what I said. It's not because they think that there's going to be a set specific curriculum of this is how you have to teach. And I said, no, it's just your standards.
Yes.
And I said, for my kids who have me this year, maybe for 3 months, and then move to somewhere else for however long, it would be the most wonderful thing we could do for them because they come to me and they may have missed an entire, strand that they need because it was not taught
Sure.
in 6th grade,
Or they went to Texas and didn't approve it. Or,
Exactly.
you know,
So I think
or you
it's
came from Iowa that did, so some
Mhm.
kids have had,
so my
you know,
kids they're
and
just
when you're
broken.
talking in the military, you got kids that have been all over.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, Korea.
Yeah.
They go all over the place, and by the time they get to me, most of them are in survival mode.
Yeah.
And it's just I'm a huge advocate of the Common Core, but most people smack me around when I say that. So they're like, "What are you thinking?"
Well, I think most of the scholars are for it.
Mhm.
And most
And
of
I think there's a misinterpretation. I think there's so many people that think it means you're going to have to teach this specific way. It's to me, it's just it's a set of standards.
the whole notion, a lot of people misread the standards movement.
Mm-hmm.
The standards movement does not prescribe how
How.
to teach. It describes the standards that people should know.
Mm-hmm.
And then because if those are standards, then it leaves up to you how you get there.
Exactly. It doesn't change the way. And most of the stuff, what's there, you should be teaching anyway.
The high school students, the new technique is a disadvantage.
I'm so sleepy.
This is the other thing that's taken, right?
If you hear me
No,
snore, just
no, it's
throw
not
something at me.
necessarily.
If you hear me
It's not
snore,
about
throw
the
something at me.
technique.
Well,
This
you get
is
done talking.
selection.
I'm
Because
good.
I'm giving
And I
this
forgot to
technique
just
to
stop
better
by.
students, right? Graduate students, selection bias, I'm being